She was supposed to be family, just 17 years old. What was meant to be a summer visit, 3 quiet months in a small Midwestern town, turned into something far more tragic. By the end of July, 1 woman was dead, 1 teenager was in police custody, and a once close family was destroyed beyond recognition. It all started with a 911 call from a neighbor who spotted something strange just past the fence line. At first they thought it was a pile of clothes, but it wasn't. It was a woman, face down, barefoot, and motionless. She had no ID on her, no phone, and no obvious explanation for how she ended up there. Officers secured the scene and began to search the nearby property. Within the hour, they found the teenager, Jessica, inside the house crying uncontrollably. She was covered in someone else's blood. When they asked her what happened, she just said, "I didn't mean for any of this." At first they thought it was a simple domestic tragedy, but detectives noticed something strange. Jessica wouldn't stop asking if they had found her journal. She kept repeating one name, and it wasn't the name of the victim. When they asked if someone had told her to keep a secret, her entire body went still. What police uncovered next was so disturbing. They sealed the crime scene for 48 hours straight. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a case like this. Emily Sanders was the kind of woman everyone in town trusted. She taught Sunday school every week. She baked for church fundraisers, and she never missed a single one of her kids' soccer games. Married for nearly 12 years, Emily and her husband David seemed like the picture of stability. From the outside, their life in rural Missouri looked simple, steady, even admirable. But on July 18th, Emily didn't show up to teach her Sunday class. By evening, she still hadn't returned home. Her phone went straight to voicemail, her car was still in the driveway, and her children, just 8 and 10, were left with questions no one could answer. That same week, Emily's 17-year-old cousin Rachel had come to stay with them for the summer. A break from life in Oklahoma, a chance to reconnect with family. At least that's what everyone believed. But Rachel had her own reasons for being there, and none of them had to do with family. David Sanders told police he last saw his wife the night before she vanished. He said she'd gone for a walk to clear her head. He said she'd been distant lately, distracted, moody. But then came the text message, sent from Emily's phone, after she was already gone, and it didn't sound like Emily at all. Within days, suspicion fell on 2 people, David Sanders, her husband, and Rachel, the girl who was supposed to be like a daughter to them. What drove a man to betray his wife with her teenage cousin? Why did Emily disappear just days before their anniversary? And how did one text message unravel the truth? Let me know when you're ready for the next section. Emily Sanders had the kind of presence that filled a room without needing to say much. She taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, volunteered twice a week at the food pantry, and sang alto in the church choir every Sunday. She didn't gossip. She didn't raise her voice. She showed up every single time for everyone in her life. To most who knew her, Emily was more than just a mother or a wife. She was the backbone of her small community. The one who remembered birthdays, who brought homemade soup to the sick, who always had an extra seat at her table. Her husband, David Sanders, was quieter, a mechanic by trade. Loyal, hardworking, respected around town for never overcharging a customer and always getting the job done right. But those who knew him well say he'd changed over the years. Somewhere between bills and routine and the quiet toll of time, something had hardened in him. He became withdrawn, quick to shut down, not angry, just absent, emotionally checked out. They had their patterns. Emily picked up the slack. David buried himself in work. The marriage wasn't volatile, but it was tired, familiar, stretched thin, though neither of them would ever say that out loud. Then came Rachel, 17, the daughter of Emily's estranged cousin. Life hadn't been kind to her. Her mother struggled with addiction. Her father hadn't been around in years. She'd bounced between schools, friends, and foster homes. So when Emily offered to let her stay for the summer, to give her some structure, some peace. It was seen as an act of kindness. But Rachel wasn't looking for structure. She was looking for something else. And in a house where tension already hung in the air, her arrival wasn't just noticed. It shifted everything. Friends described Rachel as quiet, observant, always watching. She didn't say much at first, but within weeks she'd found her rhythm in the Sanders home, helping with the kids, cleaning up after dinner, sitting in on family movie nights. She even started attending church on Sundays, next to Emily in the pew. Still, there were subtle moments that didn't sit right, glances that lingered too long, changes in behavior that seemed small but weren't missed. Neighbors said David became different the moment Rachel moved in. He was suddenly home more often. He started shaving every day again, fixing things that had gone untouched for months. One neighbor remembered seeing David and Rachel talking in the driveway, long after Emily and the kids had gone inside. Nothing happened, but something had shifted. Meanwhile, Emily tried to keep things together. She believed in second chances. She believed Rachel deserved a safe place. But what she didn't see, or maybe chose not to see, was the way her home was being quietly dismantled from the inside. Rachel started borrowing Emily's clothes, wearing her perfume, asking questions about her relationship with David. She'd flip through Emily's old photo albums when no one was around. One afternoon, she was caught trying on her jewelry. She laughed it off, said she was just curious. Emily didn't press it, but later that night, she locked the drawer. And somewhere between trust and discomfort, suspicion began to grow. Let me know when you're ready for the next segment. July 16th started like any other summer morning in Fairview, Missouri. The sun came up over the fields. Kids played in sprinklers. The air was thick with heat, but still quiet. At the Sanders home, Emily made breakfast, packed lunches for the kids, and kissed her husband on the cheek before he left for the garage. She had plans that afternoon to visit a friend from church, but she never showed up. When the kids asked where she was, David told them their mother had gone for a walk to clear her head. He said she'd been feeling stressed, overwhelmed, that she just needed some space. When she still hadn't come back by nightfall, David made a call to the local sheriff's department. He said his wife had been gone for hours, said it wasn't like her. But the deputy who took the report later told investigators that something about the call didn't feel right. David was calm, too calm. He didn't ask any questions, didn't seem worried, just repeated that Emily had probably gone out for air and would turn up soon. But she didn't. By the next morning, her car was still in the driveway. Her purse was inside. Her phone was missing. So were her walking shoes. And Rachel, when asked if she'd seen Emily, said only that she'd heard the front door open around 7 p.m., but hadn't thought anything of it. It wasn't until the evening of July 18th that the first real break in the case came. A farmhand from a neighboring property was clearing a path through one of the cornfields when he noticed something strange, a reddish-brown trail winding through the tall stalks. He followed it for nearly 50 yards before he stopped cold. There, tangled in the brush, was a bloodied scarf. Nearby, a faint indentation in the soil, as if something or someone had been dragged. He called 911. Deputies arrived within minutes. The field was immediately cordoned off. Dogs were brought in, cadaver teams, forensics. What they found next stopped them in their tracks. Roughly 3 feet beneath the surface, just beyond a row of irrigation pipes, they uncovered a makeshift grave. Shallow, rushed, covered with broken corn stalks and dry soil. Inside was the body of a woman. She was face down, her hands bound behind her back with duct tape. The clothing matched what Emily had been wearing when she disappeared. Her face had been struck multiple times. There were deep lacerations along her neck and shoulders, defensive wounds on both arms, and no shoes. Beside the grave was something even more chilling, a small metal charm bracelet, still clasped. The initials ES etched into the back. There was no longer any doubt. Emily Sanders hadn't gone for a walk. She hadn't run away. She had been killed. But what stunned police wasn't just where the blood trail led. It was what else they found buried in the same field. Roughly 10 feet away, hidden beneath a pile of tarp and plastic, was a half-burned trash bag. Inside were items investigators couldn't explain: an old sweatshirt that didn't belong to Emily, a man's work gloves, and a teenage girl's notebook. The front cover had been ripped off, but page after page was filled with the same handwriting. Some pages were just drawings, others were letters. But one entry, dated just 2 weeks before Emily vanished, read, "She doesn't deserve him. She doesn't even notice him anymore. I could make him happy. I know I could." The handwriting matched samples taken from Rachel's school assignments. That night she was brought in for questioning. She denied everything, said she had no idea what the journal meant, claimed she wrote things like that all the time. Fiction, fantasies, things she never intended to act on. When asked where she'd been the night Emily disappeared, she gave a timeline that didn't match David's or the kids', and when police showed her a photo of the scarf found in the field, her hands began to shake. She said she'd never seen it before, but the scarf had already been matched to a selfie Rachel had posted just 3 weeks earlier. Meanwhile, David's behavior was raising flags of its own. Despite being the husband of a missing woman, he never once joined the search efforts. He didn't put up flyers, didn't call her family. And when investigators searched his phone, they found multiple deleted text messages to an unsaved number. Messages they were later able to recover. Some were harmless, others weren't. One read, "She won't be a problem much longer." Another, "After next week it's just us." Both were sent to a phone belonging to Rachel. At 3:26 a.m. on July 17th, just hours after Emily's disappearance, Rachel received a final message. "It's done. Burn everything." But she didn't. She kept the notebook. She kept the gloves. She kept enough for police to piece together a picture that was even darker than they'd imagined. This wasn't a moment of rage. It wasn't spontaneous, it was something else. Let me know when you're ready for the next section. Detective Michelle Harmon had been with the county sheriff's department for over 25 years. Sharp, methodical, and respected by her peers, she'd worked every kind of case rural Missouri had to offer, from small-time thefts to long-buried cold cases. But something about this one felt off from the very beginning. When Harmon arrived at the crime scene in the cornfield, she didn't speak for a full 5 minutes. She just looked, noted the shallow grave, the blood trail, the placement of the tarp and plastic. Someone had tried to cover their tracks, but not well. It was rushed, emotional, sloppy. Then there were the tire tracks, faint, but visible, about 20 feet from the grave. Muddy, uneven, like someone had driven up in a hurry, stopped, and backed out quickly. A cast of the treads came back matching an older model Ford pickup. David Sanders drove a Ford pickup. The blood spatter near the start of the trail showed signs of a struggle, drops rather than pools, a pattern that suggested movement, someone being dragged, but there were no signs of forced entry at the Sanders home, no broken locks, no overturned furniture, which meant either Emily left willingly or she trusted whoever let her out. Inside the house, Harmon combed through every room. Emily's closet had been untouched, except for one missing blouse and a pair of flats. Her nightstand still held a half-finished book, her reading glasses resting on top. In the trash, a receipt for ice cream, dated the night before she disappeared. 2 flavors, one for her daughter, one Emily never liked, but Rachel did. Rachel's room was pristine, too pristine, almost like it had been cleaned for someone else's benefit. Harmon ran her hand along the baseboards, checked inside drawers, lifted the corner of the mattress. She was about to walk out when something caught her eye, a corner of torn paper sticking out from underneath the bed. She reached down and pulled out a floral-covered diary. The pages were chaotic, emotional, scribbled in multiple colors of pen, sometimes with whole sections crossed out, but certain passages were legible and disturbing. "He told me she never touched him anymore. She doesn't get him. Not like I do. She has everything, and she doesn't even care. All I have to do is wait. She's slipping. He said it himself. The final entry was short. Tomorrow. I'm ready. Rachel was brought back into the interrogation room. This time, Detective Harmon didn't waste time with small talk. She opened the diary, flipped to the last page, and slid it across the table without saying a word. Rachel stared at it for a long time. Then she said, "You don't know what he did to me." She claimed David had manipulated her, that he knew she was vulnerable, that he used her trust, that he promised to leave Emily, but never did. She said Emily found out about the affair, and that's when things turned violent. According to Rachel, both she and Emily were being emotionally abused by David. She said she feared for her life, that she only kept the diary in case something happened. But David had his own version of events. When confronted with the texts and the glove evidence, David didn't deny the affair. He admitted to it, said it had been a terrible mistake, said he was ashamed, but he insisted that Rachel had become unstable, that she had developed a fixation on him, that she was jealous of Emily, that she made threats. He said the night Emily disappeared, he had been asleep on the couch, that he woke up and Rachel was just standing there, smiling, and Emily was gone. Detectives didn't buy that either. Then came the burner phone. It had been discovered hidden beneath the back porch, wrapped in a sock inside an empty paint can. The SIM card had been removed, but the phone still contained fragments of deleted messages, enough to put together a pattern. Texts between David and Rachel, meeting times, private locations. One in particular stood out. "You said we'd be together. You said you'd fix it." Digital forensics placed the burner near the cornfield at 3 a.m. on the morning Emily was buried. Still, the case was tangled. Rachel's diary painted David as a manipulative adult who preyed on a teenager. David's texts, though damning, were vague enough to create room for doubt, and both of them were pointing fingers at each other. Then came another complication. A man named Joel Carter came forward, a former classmate of Rachel's from Oklahoma. He claimed Rachel had reached out to him a month before Emily's death, asked if he still had access to something strong, meaning, investigators later learned, tranquilizers. He'd refused, said it creeped him out. Harmon was skeptical, but the digital footprint backed it up. A message from Rachel's old account. "If someone was hurting someone you cared about, would you stop them?" That was sent 3 weeks before Emily disappeared. Now, two narratives sat before the investigation. One, David Sanders, an emotionally distant husband, seduced a troubled teenager, then killed his wife to be with her, using Rachel as either a pawn or an accomplice. 2, Rachel, already emotionally unstable, became obsessed with David, lashed out when she couldn't have him fully, and murdered Emily in a fit of rage, framing David in the process. For Detective Harmon, the truth still felt just out of reach. But there was one more room in the house she hadn't searched thoroughly. The basement. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. It was Detective Harmon who finally made the call to search the basement again. She wasn't sure what she expected to find, maybe nothing. But something about Rachel's story and David's version of it wasn't lining up. Not in timing, not in tone, not in truth. There, behind an old shelving unit stacked with paint cans and broken holiday lights, Harmon found an unmarked cardboard box. Inside, wrapped in a zip-up hoodie, was a digital voice recorder. A small, outdated model. Nothing expensive, the kind you'd pick up at a drugstore. It was low on battery, covered in dust, but it still worked. The device contained 5 audio files. The first few were ordinary. Conversations between Emily and the kids. A call with her sister. Nothing useful. But the fourth one was different. The room is quiet. There's the sound of the ceiling fan. Then footsteps. A whisper. Then a voice. Rachel. She's already asking questions. I don't think I can keep this up. Then David. Just a few more days. We'll make it look like she left on her own. People will believe that. They already know she's been struggling. Rachel again. Promise me. Once it's done, it's us. For real. David. It's always been us. That file lasted only 47 seconds, but it was enough. Enough to change the trajectory of the entire investigation. Detectives had assumed Emily found out about the affair shortly before her death, but the recorder proved otherwise. She'd known for weeks, and she wasn't just grieving. She was planning. The fifth audio file was shorter, just 28 seconds. It began with Rachel's voice, panicked, whispering, "What if she tells someone?" David responded with something nearly inaudible, but when the file was enhanced, the words became clearer. "She won't. Not if she's gone by Monday." Emily had planted the recorder in her bedroom, hoping to capture the truth, maybe to confront them, maybe to protect herself. But she never got the chance. Then came the lab results. DNA samples taken from under Emily's fingernails came back with a hit. Rachel, skin cells, blood, consistent with a struggle. The injuries on Emily's arms now made even more sense. She had fought back. The question was, did she fight both of them? At this point, the district attorney's office decided there was enough evidence to file charges against both David Sanders and Rachel. The case would go to trial, jointly. In court, the story unfolded like a carefully constructed tragedy, one that had been building for months. The prosecution started with the voice recordings, played them for the jury. The courtroom sat in silence as David's voice promised Rachel, "It's always been us," as Rachel's voice, timid but sure, asked for the plan. The tension was suffocating. Then came the diary. The entry dated just days before Emily's murder. "He said he loved me, that we'd be together once she was gone. I believe him. I have to." Rachel took the stand. Her attorney painted her as a victim, manipulated by a much older man. Alone, vulnerable, damaged by years of emotional neglect. She sobbed as she spoke, looked directly at the jury, said she had believed David would protect her. "He said I was his soulmate," she whispered, through tears. "He told me she was toxic, that she was breaking him. He made me feel like I was saving him." The courtroom fell quiet again. Then came David's turn. He sat upright, wore a black suit. No tears, no visible emotion. When asked directly if he had ever told Rachel to harm his wife, he replied, "No, I told her we needed space. I never told her to do anything. She acted on her own." He said he was ashamed of the affair, that it had been a terrible mistake, that Rachel had grown obsessed, that when Emily found out, Rachel panicked, that he hadn't known what she was capable of. But the recording said otherwise. So did the burner phone. And the final blow came when a digital forensics expert testified that even after Emily's death, David had continued messaging Rachel under a fake name, asking if she'd destroyed the journal, asking if she'd told them everything. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Guilty. Both of them. Rachel, charged with second-degree murder, sentenced to 30 years without parole. David found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and accessory before the fact. 50 years, no possibility of early release. After the verdict, the judge looked at David and said, "You orchestrated this from the shadows. You used your position, your age, your authority, to manipulate a child into committing the unthinkable." Rachel was let out in tears. David didn't flinch. 3 years had passed since the verdict was handed down. Rachel, now 20, was serving her sentence at a women's correctional facility in northern Missouri. She was classified as a high-risk inmate, not for violence, but for psychological instability. She kept to herself, attended group therapy, and for the most part, remained quiet. Until one day, her prison-assigned therapist, Dr. Lena Corbett, filed a report. It wasn't a formal complaint. It wasn't even a criminal accusation, just a professional observation. But what it said changed everything. Dr. Corbett wrote that after 2 years of sessions, She no longer believed Rachel was simply complicit in the murder of Emily Sanders. She believed Rachel had been targeted, groomed, from the very beginning. According to Dr. Corbett's notes, Rachel didn't just fall in love with David. She had been love-starved, emotionally damaged from years of neglect at home, and vulnerable to any adult who showed her attention. And David, according to the therapist, had honed in on that fact almost immediately. She cited Rachel's patterns, the way she recounted David's words like scripture, the way she defended him, even while acknowledging the horror of what had happened, the way she flinched every time she mentioned the word manipulate. Dr. Corbett submitted excerpts from their recorded therapy sessions to the parole board, one of which stood out. Rachel, her voice trembling, said, "He made me feel like I was chosen, like no one else saw me, but he did. He'd say things like, 'You don't belong with kids your age, you're special. You get me in a way even Emily never could.' I didn't know it at the time, but he was planting something in me, and I let it grow." Corbett's report was filed away quietly, until a reporter from a local newspaper, working on a story about women incarcerated as juveniles, got a copy under the state's Open Records Act. The article ran online first, then national outlets picked it up. Suddenly, the conversation changed. Rachel had been branded a manipulative teenager, a jealous girl who killed for love. Now people were asking, was she just another victim? The answer became more complicated when, 6 months after the article, another piece of evidence surfaced. A computer technician working with the Missouri Bureau of Investigation was conducting a routine audit on cold storage drives when he came across an archived voicemail file. It had been labeled incorrectly, filed under a different case number. But when he hit play, he heard a man's voice. Confident, calm, familiar. It was David Sanders. "You don't need to feel weird, okay? It's not like I see you as a kid. You've got this maturity. There's something real between us. You feel it too, right?" The message was addressed to someone named Lila. The date stamp was 2 months before Rachel ever arrived in Missouri. Further digging revealed Lila was a 16-year-old waitress at a diner David used to visit on his lunch breaks. She'd reported the message to her boss, but never the police. Said it made her uncomfortable, but nothing happened. But the tape confirmed one thing. Rachel wasn't the first, and she might not have been the only one. Prosecutors reviewed the tape, but David was already serving life without parole. No new charges were filed, no new trials were opened. Still, public opinion began to shift. Some saw Rachel as a killer who got off easy, someone who knew what she was doing and wanted it. Others saw her as a broken child, groomed by an older man, pulled into something far darker than she could comprehend. Her lawyer filed a clemency petition, citing psychological coercion. It was denied. She remains incarcerated to this day. But the story doesn't end there, because months after the revelation, Emily's sister, Melissa, finally released the contents of Emily's journal, the one found locked in the drawer of her nightstand, the one she'd been writing in quietly, every night, for weeks leading up to her death. The final entry was short. It read, "If anything happens to me, tell the kids I tried to protect them." That one sentence turned the courtroom whispers into echoes. It put to rest any doubts that Emily knew something was coming, that she saw the storm, felt it, growing inside her own home. And yet she stayed. For her kids, for the life she built, for the hope, however faint, that love could be repaired. This case has become more than just a murder story. It's about the blurred lines between love and control, between vulnerability and manipulation, between family and betrayal. Rachel was 17, David was 39, Emily was 36, a mother, a teacher, a woman who saw what was happening and left behind a final plea to be remembered not as a victim, but as someone who tried. And now, a question still lingers. One that no jury, no court, no therapist can fully answer. Was Rachel a monster, or just another casualty of one? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you're watching from somewhere around the world, tell us where. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a case like this one again. Was justice really served in this case? Rachel will spend most of her life behind bars. David will die in prison. But Emily is still gone. 2 children lost their mother. A family shattered by secrets that festered behind closed doors. Some say the system worked. Others believe it failed. By not recognizing the signs sooner, by not protecting a teenage girl from a man twice her age. So we want to hear from you. Do you believe Rachel was a cold-hearted killer, or a manipulated victim caught in a predator's trap? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and if this case left you unsettled, you'll want to be here next week. Because in our next episode, a bride walked down the aisle believing it was the happiest day of her life, until her ex showed up, armed, angry, and ready to make sure the ceremony ended in blood. It's a story of obsession, warning signs, and a wedding no one will ever forget. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a twist in our next real-life crime story. And thank you for watching.